Welcome, Army fans. This is Joe Iacono with GoBlackKnights.com, along with Army Offensive Coordinator Cody Worley. Coach, how was practice today? How's the team looking going into the bye week, kind of?
It was good. I thought it could have been better. I think our guys are still recovering a little bit from the trip, getting back at 6 a.m. and going right back to West Point. But it was a good wake up call. We needed the work that we got today, but the energy needs to be better and the effort needs to be better. So challenged them, and I think they'll respond well. But overall, we did some good things. We just need to be cleaner and need to be better.
Good. Appreciate the honesty on that. Talk about the team's overall performance on offense Saturday night. What were you most impressed with, and where do you guys think you still need to improve?
Yeah, the slow start was hampered by penalties. Obviously, it was really loud, and they had a lot to do with it with the false starts. One of them, Kale, got kind of mixed up on one of them, and then the other one, Parker just couldn't hear. So we've got to do a better job of putting them in positions during practice so they can respond. But I thought I tip my hat to Kansas State. It was a phenomenal defense, in my opinion. I thought they had a really, really good plan and well executed and well coached. And it was a really physical contest. It took some body blows to soften it. And luckily, in the second half, we were able to hit a knockout punch. But they made it really challenging with how they were playing, what they were doing, mixing up looks and doing a lot of good things. But I thought we responded after the slow start. We were able to get a touchdown at the end of half, which was critical on a fourth
Yeah.
down with no time left, and hit a walk-off that gave us some momentum going into the second half. Had another slow drive to start and go 3 and out. But that some things happen. The football gods were on our side this week, and
Yeah.
that's football. And some good things happen, and we were able to capitalize. But just the resiliency and the grit of the group altogether. To execute 7 4th downs, and they weren't 4th and 1. And
Right.
some of the even the 4th down that we missed, it was a really good opportunity. The ball was behind Carson there, needed a better throw, but had an opportunity to execute, just didn't. But
Yeah.
to see how our guys responded after the first week and see how they responded in that environment, I didn't realize because I'm up in the box, but how loud it was. And really just to make the type of plays that we made, staying on the field on 4th down, converting on 4th down, finding a way to get in the box, all the things that we could control offensively. When you look at the plan, we were able to do that this week. 4-4 in the red zone. Really, we were 16 of 22 on conversion downs. We protected the football. We stayed on the field. We played Army football. So I was really pleased with that and how we responded up front, how we responded just collectively as a team. But again, we're still a work in progress. We still got guys that haven't played a ton of football that are improving week to week, and that is showing up. We're able to get some guys back healthy, which was huge. Leo Fortner was able to play in the game more snaps than he planned on, but he felt good, and so we let him ride, and he did. It was really, really positive to get him back, but we've got it. The bye week couldn't have come at a better time. We're pretty banged up from the long trip in that game, and 2 games of 80+ snaps on offense is a lot,
Yeah.
and so recovering this week, but we still got a lot of work to do in the intentional details and fundamentals and how we approach practice and the professionalism. We got to continue to build on that from a leadership standpoint, but we're still a work in progress. We got a lot of work to do.
Good. Yeah. Great explanation. Talked a little bit, obviously, the kind of big story was Kale Hellam's first start, right? And, if you could talk a little bit about his play, how he did stepping into his first start in a tough environment on the road. Specifically, you mentioned Kansas State's defense. Their linebackers, especially 45 Romaine, I think it was one of the better linebackers I think we've played against in the last couple of years. Not going to say he's the best, but he was one of the better ones. So for Kale to go in there, first start, hostile environment, talk a little bit about his play and what you thought of him his first start out.
Yeah, gritty, tough. He made tremendous decisions. Even in the pass game, tucking the ball and making plays with his feet, throwing the ball when things weren't there, made some clutch throws in critical scenarios, but just really tough and gritty performance. And, didn't anticipate him breaking a Army record of carries. Some of those came at the end of the game trying to milk the clock, but he did what he needed to do. And I had trust with him and his performance the week before and what he showcased really since spring ball and how he's approached things. So I was really pleased with how he responded and the way that he was able to move our offense and how guys around him responded. So still things that he needs to build on and clean up, but what an unbelievable first start. And to play in that environment against a defense that prides themselves on stopping the run, and they're tough, they're physical, they're big. It was just really gritty, and that's who he is. And I think he'll learn a lot from the performance as a whole and what he needs to get better at. But I was just so proud of him and how our unit responded around him and helped him. But unbelievably tough, gritty performance, and he just found a way. He was outstanding in a lot of ways.
Yeah, you mentioned, gritty a number of times, which I think is a great description. You also mentioned his decision making. And I think one of the things that impressed us the most watching him was some of the stuff that doesn't show up in the stat sheet necessarily. But the play before the fourth down touchdown pass to Anderson, he rolls out, there's nothing there, he chucks it away. Most Army quarterbacks, I'm not going to say all, I've been watching Army football a long time. They will try and play hero and try and force that one in. And I thought Cale did a really nice job not putting you guys in bad plays.
He did, and we have that conversation all the time of, there's going to be times that I call a play and they have a better play call, and that's college football. Those guys get paid a lot of money to do what they do. And so for him to be able to overcome coaching and, when things weren't there and they broke down, he was able to make plays with his feet. Like I said before, just the ability to escape the pocket and throw things away and trust that we have another down in that scenario, and trust at the time on the clock, he couldn't have squeezed it any longer. He needed to get it out of his hands so we could get the fourth down play call off. But I was just really pleased with his decision-making as a whole. In the run game, in the pass game, still some things that he needs to correct and get better. But, that was a huge play in the game. The throwaway on third down was a good play. We didn't lose yards on that, and we were able to punt and pin them deep. So, I was really pleased with his decision-making overall and protecting the football.
And, so now kind of the question is Cale QB1 going forward, or are you guys going to decide that kind of on a week-by-week basis?
Yeah, I mean, you assess things weekly regardless
Okay.
of performance. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And he certainly has earned the opportunity to be the guy. You know what I mean? So
Yep.
we're going to need Dwayne. We're going to need Zach Mundell. We're going to need Bryson Luter. We're going to need everybody.
Yeah.
And as you know, you've followed Army football for a long time, and we're going to need multiple
Not
quarterbacks.
many guys play all 12 games.
That's exactly right. So, we're going to need those guys to play, but he certainly, with his performance, earned the opportunity to be the guy.
Good stuff. You mentioned the guys around them getting better throughout the game. I personally noticed blocking seemed better, less missed assignments. Maybe I'm wrong, but it seemed like there were less missed assignments. I felt like the slot backs blocked better. The offensive line certainly improved as the game went along. Talk a little bit about the O-line play and just the blocking in general.
Yeah, so major improvements, and we joked about it, but the defense that we faced, that was a calculus 6 exam for the guys up front. They didn't hold anything back, and you could tell that they practiced and worked on their plan throughout the summer, throughout the spring, throughout fall camp. They were extremely well coached and did a really good job. And some of the protections and passing off twists in games, and to give us opportunities in the pass game, and way more physical. And when you have the ball for 27 minutes in the second half, and just to see the O-line start to chip away and take over the game, was really, I mean, it's Army football. That's who we are. That's our identity. And major improvements from game one to game two. And that's all you can hope for as a coach. Hopefully we continue that trend into the bye week and into game week, prepping for American Conference opponent, who I think is really talented and really good. So, we've still got to progress, but I was really pleased with how they handled their business and the response up front and taking ownership. But to rush for 260 yards against that team every yard was earned. Every single yard was earned, So, they did a tremendous job, but I thought that our offensive line answered the call, and they were disappointed with their performance and the way they responded throughout the week of practice and the way that they were able to finish that game. It showed who we can be if we continue to get better.
And now we're gonna kind of shift to a position that doesn't get talked a lot about Army. You mentioned Liam Fortner and having him in the game. What a big difference he makes with his blocking. I think everybody saw that.
Yep.
Talk a little bit about Liam as well as Brady Anderson, who again had a couple big catches in the game, and he's just becoming a weapon there on the outside for you guys.
Well, like I said, it was huge getting Liam back. Just his presence alone in the huddle as a leader on our offense, and we know what he brings to the table from a physicality standpoint. But just his leadership and having him back, that breeds confidence into the whole unit. And so it was really good to have him back. And I've been super impressed with Brady Anderson and the things he's been able to do and making plays in the pass game. It's I know he's wide open when that ball hangs up in the air. That is a pressure-packed situation on the trick play. But for him to step in the situation and make plays and be gritty in the run game, and I tip my hat to a lot of guys. We ran at Noah Short quite a bit, and he was gritty in the run game. Parker Pulaski at tight end did a really good job, and one of the unsung heroes of the game was we give out a Dark Knight Award, which is really to the guy that does all the dirty work, and Samari Howard played incredible.
It's
incredible.
fun. I noticed that actually. I watched him during Tarleton, and I was like, but he looked really good against Kansas State, I thought. So I'm not surprised that was your answer for that award.
I mean, that kid, he may have been one of the smaller guys on the field, but he plays bigger, and just he's blocking 6'6", 280-pound defensive ends and trying to dump them. He's really physical on the perimeter, and he made 3 clutch catches in the game too. So, I was really pleased overall with some of the, like you said, the guys that don't get a lot of credit. Noah's going to always touch the stat sheet, but he did some things in the run game, blocking, that really showed up. And he takes a lot of pride in that, as well as everybody. That's who we are and who we need to be successful, selfless. And when your number gets called, you're ready for it. So I was pleased with those guys and really proud of how Brady has responded in the reps that he's gotten, and he's getting better every week. The more he plays, the better he gets. So still got a lot to clean up, but to have a guy like Fortner back in the mix, and guys are starting to play with an edge and starting to look like Army football, so just really pleased with the overall performance, but we got to bounce back and have a better week of practice this week in the bye week, and then get ready to face a really, really good opponent in North Texas.
Yep. And talk a little bit about, you mentioned Noah, and I know, you said one of your goals this year is to get him more touches, and he's now got 21 touches through 2 games, plus a pass, which we didn't know he had in his arsenal. So that was nice to see. And, you mentioned his blocking, but then some other guys in the backfield, Hayden and Jake go out with injuries, I think, pretty early, or Hayden went out in the second half, but Jake went out pretty early. And then Carson Smith gets a lot of carries, but also had a lot of really good blocks setting up some of Kale's runs. And Briggs Bartosh only touched the ball a couple times, but every time he touched it, I brought this up with Coach Monk on Saturday night. It just feels a little different.
Yeah, I agree. And to start out with Noah, in the first game, he's got 11 carries and 6 catches. In this game, he's got 11 carries and 3 catches or 2 catches. He's a guy, and he had the big pass. So, our goal is he's going to have double-digit touches in a game. and if we can continue that trend, that's a positive trend. He's one of our best players, and he made some really nice runs, like not what you typically see on the perimeter where things open up and he hits a crease and he showcases his speed. He was sticking his foot in the ground, making guys miss and puncture and running through contact and doing a really good job. But, he made a hell of a play on the halfback pass, and he's a focal point of our offense and will continue to be. And to see the guys step up in the backfield, Carson Smith, and like you said, Briggs Bartosh. Carson Smith, one of the biggest things that we as a staff were most proud of is his play without the football. That was a big question mark coming into the season. We knew what he could do as a runner, and with the football, he's a gritty inside runner, and but he improved drastically in his play without the ball, and he was a part of some of the big quarterback runs and as a lead blocker. So to see how he's progressed in that area was really positive in meaningful snaps against a really good team. So that kind of catapults him into the mix even more. And then Briggs is a change of pace. He's got a gear that maybe some of the other guys don't. And that we knew that going in, but to see him handle in the fourth quarter against Kansas State, first opportunity to play, just really proud of how he responded and was able to maximize his opportunities. So we got it. That room was deep going into the season, and we knew it needed to be, but now it's going to be showcased even further.
And last question for you, Coach. Going back to something you mentioned earlier about Kansas State's defense, obviously extremely athletic, very tough against the run. You called it calculus 6 because of all the different looks they gave you and everything else. How much does that help now? As you mentioned, going forward into American play, you guys have a very tough North Texas team coming up that always seems to play Army very, very tough. Later on down the line, I know you're not really thinking about this yet, but I think UAB hired a former Air Force defensive coach as their DC. And then, of course, the two academy games. How does playing a game like Kansas State just prepare you guys for the rest of these tough defenses you're going to have to face?
No, it's huge, to be able to handle some of the looks that they threw at us, especially, third downs and pass pro and some of the change up looks and some of the stunts with twist and games and pressures. And, for the most part, we missed some, but for the most part, we handled it pretty well. And we try to throw those things at our guys and make it worst case scenario as much as we can in practice. But to see how they responded and handled that in a game, I certainly think that's going to prepare us even further, because this isn't going to be the last time that we see a defense that is similar in structure. So, I think we'll learn a lot from the film and build off the positives, correct the negatives. But, every week here, especially in this league, is a challenge. And so we've got our work cut out for us and our hands full with a really, really, really talented team that's going to come to Mikey Stadium next weekend in North Texas. So I hope we can learn from things. I hope we put the game behind us, and we need to go and attack practice with the same sense of urgency that we did coming out of a loss as we did coming out of a win. And I anticipate us to do that, but we're going to need to if we're going to continue getting better week to week.
Thanks a lot, Coach Worley. Appreciate your time. Go Army, beat North Texas.